The hill screamed, not with a human voice, but with the shriek of tearing metal and the wet cough of dying men. Bodies, Briton and Saxon alike, tumbled down the steep slope of Badon like broken dolls. A single figure, his armor dulled with grime and blood, cut a swath through the chaos, his sword a silver blur in the dying light. He was no king in shining armor, no mythical hero. He was Artorius, the Duke of Battles, and around him, his dream of a free Britannia was drowning in a tide of iron and gore. Had they held the line? Had the sacrifice been enough? A guttural roar echoed from the Saxon ranks. They were not broken yet. The year of our Lord 475. 70 long years had bled away since the eagles of Rome had last soared above Britannia. Now only ghosts remained, whispering through the crumbling stones of villas and along the overgrown Roman roads. Lucius Artorius Castus carried that ghost within him, a burden inherited from a Celtic mother and a Roman father who had chosen this land over the fading glory of empire. He stood on the wind-bitten edge of Caer Badon, the hill fort that was his command, the Severn a cold, twisting serpent below. Not a king. No, the thought was a bitter taste on his tongue. Kings squabbled, their power measured in how far a man could ride in a day. Artorius was different, the Dux Bellorum, Duke of Battles, a title earned in the desperate eyes of men who saw in him the faint echo of Roman discipline, a bulwark against the encroaching darkness. They pushed deeper inland with every season, Lord. Caius's voice, rough as dried earth, broke the silence. His second, a man built like an oak, his armor a patchwork of Roman steel and Celtic leather, stood beside him, a living monument to a lost age. Artorius's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. They are no longer raiding, Caius. His words were low, heavy with understanding. Raiders take what they want and leave. These, Soesneg, Saxons, they bring their families, their plows. They are not thieves. They are planting their roots in our soil. Below them in the muddy training grounds, his Combrogi, his countrymen, moved with a rigid precision that belied their Celtic hearts. He drilled them relentlessly in the Roman shield wall, the testudo, a shell of interlocking shields, a walking fortress. He forced the short, deadly thrust of the gladius into their muscle memory, a weapon of brutal efficiency against the wild swing of the Celtic longsword. Bedwyr, a chieftain from the Welsh mountains, his skin etched with the swirling blue of woad, had resisted fiercely. "This is the way of cowards, Artorius," he had bellowed, his voice echoing across the field. "Hiding behind wood and iron. We are warriors of the hills. We fight with passion, not with walls." Artorius had approached him slowly, his face a mask of cold resolve. "Your passion is admirable, Bedwyr. It will burn bright for the few heartbeats it takes a Saxon spear to find its mark in your unprotected chest. My wall will keep that fire lit long enough to see us win." He had ordered the shield wall to advance. Bedwyr's men, for all their courage, crashed against the unyielding barrier. They were disarmed, humbled, the lesson driven home without a single serious injury. From that day, they grumbled, but they obeyed. Artorius was not just leading, he was teaching a forgotten art, the brutal science of survival. He lived within the crumbling shell of a Roman villa, the vibrant mosaics of forgotten gods cracked and faded beneath his worn boots. He would trace the outline of Mars, the god of war, a bitter smile touching his lips. The god was gone, the empire was gone. Only the war remained, a hungry beast that demanded constant feeding. And tonight, the wind carried the scent of its coming hunger, a whisper of fire and steel from the south. What fresh horror would dawn with the rising sun? The trickle had become a flood. The Saxon advance, once a slow creep along the coast, now surged inland, a river of fire and blood, led by a warlord whose name was spoken in terrified whispers, Ale. Refugees, their eyes hollow with unspeakable grief, poured into the Briton lands, their tales painting a canvas of unimaginable brutality. Finally, the petty kings, jolted from their endless squabbles by the specter of annihilation, turned their desperate gaze towards one man. They sent for the Dux Bellorum. The great council in the ruined amphitheater of Viraconium was a storm of fear and pride. Kings draped in tartan, their necks heavy with gold torques, postured and argued beneath the crumbling arches. Artorius stood apart, his plain leather and mail a stark contrast to their finery, his silence a weight in the chaotic din.
"We will meet them on open ground," one king declared, his voice booming in the ancient space. "A glorious charge to drive them back into the sea." "They outnumber us 3-1, another countered, his tone laced with panic. "We must retreat to the mountains. Let Gwynedd bleed them dry." Artorius waited until their bluster had run its course, then stepped into the center of the arena. With the heel of his boot, he scratched a crude map into the dirt. "They expect fury," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "They expect retreat. We will give them neither." He drew a line in the soil. "We will choose the battlefield. We will make them come to us. We will bleed them on ground of our choosing." His boot pointed to a small rise on the map. A hill, Mons Badonicus, Badon Hill. It guards the old Roman road, their lifeline. It is steep, unforgiving. To attack it is to attack the very sky. There we will make our stand. Trailing the ragged Briton army was a young monk, Brother Elian, his face pale and his eyes wide with a scholar's curiosity and a pilgrim's fear. He had journeyed from the monastery at Glastonia, tasked with chronicling the Britons' sins, recording their inevitable fall as penance for turning their backs on God. He saw in Artorius not a savior, but a symbol of the brutal, godless times. His charcoal stick danced across scraps of vellum, capturing every detail with a detached precision. The march to Badon was a descent into misery. Rain lashed down, turning the land into a treacherous mire. The army, a fragile tapestry of warring tribes, was held together only by the iron thread of Artorius's will. Elian watched him, expecting to see the glint of pride, the hunger for glory. Instead, he saw only a profound weariness etched onto the warlord's face, the weight of a crushing burden. At Badon, Artorius's grim genius unfolded. His spearmen formed a dense, unyielding hedgehog on the steepest slopes. Archers, silent shadows, melted into the trees on the flanks. His most potent weapon, the heavy cavalry, Bedwyr, Caius, their Romano-British steeds powerful and sure-footed, remained hidden behind the crest of the hill, a coiled spring of destruction.
Then they came, the Saxons, a roaring tide of horned helmets and crude iron, their war horns a guttural bellow that seemed to shake the very earth. They saw the meager Briton force arrayed on the hill, and a savage laughter rippled through their ranks. They charged, a vast, undisciplined wave, eager for plunder and renown, exactly as Artorius had foreseen. They crashed against the shield wall, The incline stole their momentum, and the Britons, their short swords flashing in the Roman manner, carved bloody furrows in the Saxon ranks. For the span of a single endless day, the Saxons hurled themselves against the hill, and for a single endless day, they were broken and thrown back, the green slopes of Badon turning a sickening slick red. Brother Elian, watching from a distance, his scholarly detachment crumbling, found his hand trembling uncontrollably. This was not the chaotic brawl of legend. This was a meticulously orchestrated slaughter, a grim symphony conducted by the quiet man in the blood-soaked armor. As twilight bled across the ravaged landscape on the second day, the exhausted Saxons launched one final, desperate assault on the center of the Briton line. This was the moment Artorius had waited for. As the Saxon ranks stretched thin, scrambling up the muddy slope, he raised his hand. A single horn, sharp and clear, sliced through the din of battle. From behind the crest, the cavalry erupted, not shining knights of myth, but a terrifying wave of horseflesh and steel. Leading them was Artorius, his helmet plain but for a single plume of red horsehair. On his shield, not a dragon, but the simple chi rho, a whispered prayer in iron, a symbol of the new faith, a fragile hope offered to his desperate men. They slammed into the Saxon line like a thunderbolt. Bedwyr, his Welsh war cry a primal scream, became a whirlwind of death. Caius, his face grim, fought with the cold, brutal efficiency of a lifetime of war, and Artorius, the Dux Bellorum, moved through the carnage with a lethal grace, his sword drinking deeply of Saxon blood. The Saxon line, which had held against the relentless Briton defense, buckled, then shattered. Panic, a disease more potent than any weapon, spread through their ranks. The charge became a rout, the rout a massacre. The Battle of Mount Badon was won. A victory so complete, so devastating, that the Saxon advance would halt for a generation. Amidst the carnage, Caius lay still, a Saxon axe buried in his chest. Artorius knelt beside him, his face etched with grief too profound for tears, and closed his friend's sightless eyes. Brother Elian, venturing onto the blood-soaked field in the eerie silence that followed the storm of battle, saw the victorious commander not in triumph, but kneeling in the mud, weeping for his dead. The historian in him recorded the fact, but the monk in him felt a shift, a dawning understanding. What seed of legend would sprout from this bloody earth?
40 years had passed, a fragile peace bought with a mountain of corpses. Artorius was gone, resting in the quiet earth of Glastonbury Abbey. But the Saxon shadow was lengthening once more, the memory of Badon fading like a half-remembered dream. In the cold, silent scriptorium of the abbey, an old man with white hair and ink-stained fingers bent over a roll of vellum. Brother Elian, now the abbot, was nearing the end of his great work, De Excidio et Conquesti Britanniae. But by the flickering light of a single candle, he was also crafting another secret history, not for kings or scholars, but for the soul of his people. He wrote of the dark times, the terror and the flames, and he wrote of the one man who had stood against the night. His quill hovered over the parchment. How to capture the essence of Artorius? The weary warlord in scavenged armor was the truth, but truth alone held no power to inspire the coming generations. His mind drifted back to the battle, to the moment Artorius had given the signal for the charge. The setting sun had caught the crest of his helmet, igniting it as if from within. Elian wrote, his hand steady, and the Lord's champion, Arthur, shone with a divine light. He remembered the cavalry, the Combrogi, brave men on strong horses.
But in the whispers around the hearthfires, they had become something more. He led his company of knights, the bravest in Christendom, he wrote. The shield with its simple Christian symbol. Over the years, the stories had embroidered it, Nennius claiming the image of the Virgin Mary graced its surface. Elian nodded to himself. It gave the battle a holy purpose. He added it to his own account. He was not lying. He was shaping the truth, forging it in the fires of hope and memory. The hard, cold facts of a brutal war were being translated into the language of myth, the only language strong enough to defy the relentless erosion of time. Artorius, the man, was gone, but the idea of him, the bear, the guardian, had to endure. He wrote of 12 great battles, some real, some woven from the deeds of forgotten heroes, all attributed to the one man who could carry their weight. He wrote not of a Dux Bellorum, a Roman title lost to the New Age, but of a king, a hero. His quill scratched the final lines. He knew the peace was a fragile thing, that the Saxon tide would rise again, engulfing this land, remaking it in their own image. But he also knew that in the hidden valleys of Wales, in the hearts of the Britons, this story would live, a seed of defiance, a promise whispered through the generations. A great king had risen once. Could he rise again? The candle sputtered, casting long, dancing shadows across the scriptorium. The history was complete. The legend had begun. The real story of Lucius Artorius Castus, the last echo of Roman power in Britannia, was now and forever the legend of King Arthur, the once and future king.